What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld, and this is episode 3 of Hockey on the Spot. Thank you all for watching. Well, August is here, and you know what that means. That's right, the 30 NHL teams in 30 days has begun, going in the order of alphabetical order by division, starting with the Pacific Division. So therefore, the first team that we will be talking about in our 30 teams in 30 days is none other than the Anaheim Ducks. And it's been a very interesting offseason for the Anaheim Ducks, to say the least. After a very rough 2011-2012 season that saw them finish last place in the Pacific Division, as well as 13th in the West and 6th overall in the league, and 6th to last overall in the league. Um, they had a big rebound season, and it looks like Bruce Boudreau's system is finally starting to kick in. In a lockout-shortened 2012-2013 season that was limited to just 48 games, the Anaheim Ducks won their first Pacific Division title in 5 years, finishing second in the Western Conference and third overall in the league, which is their highest placement ever as far as overall league standings go. That one place higher than their 06-07 team. And that basically just came out of nowhere, considering Anaheim was not expected to be a playoff team for this upcoming season. Unfortunately, the Anaheim Ducks would suffer an early first-round exit by the hand of their arch playoff rivals, the Detroit Red Wings, in 7 games. It was the first time ever that they played each other in a situation where Anaheim would have the home ice advantage, but the favor still went in favor of a veteran Detroit Red Wings team that just barely made it into the playoffs on the last day. So, but as far as general manager Bob Murray is concerned, he was able to take this past year's playoff as a learning experience for his youngsters. And for his youngsters, in those 7 games, they looked like players who had been in the league for a very long time, which tells us that the Anaheim Ducks have a very bright future ahead of them. But during the off-season, they had to clear a lot of cap room as they were very, very close to the cap, and Bob Murray and the Anaheim Ducks are a team that does not like to play close to the cap. They got very close to the cap midway through the season when they signed both Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry to those 8-year extensions in a span of about 10 days. And that made Bobby Ryan's contract expendable because they needed to get him out of there. His contract was taking up too much cap room. And after all the rumors of Bobby Ryan being traded out of Anaheim, the rumors have finally come true. So Bobby Ryan was dealt this offseason to the Ottawa Senators, pretty much as their replacement for Daniel Alfredsson. But in return, Anaheim got a good package of youth. Some good young players, including Jakob Silfverberg, who just completed his rookie season in the National Hockey League, and a successful rookie season for sure, scoring 10 goals and 9 assists for a combined 19 points. A guy who was also a superstar over in Sweden. They also got a young player by the name of Stefan Nason, who was a first-round pick by the Ottawa Senators in the 2011 NHL entry draft, 21st overall, a player who Anaheim initially had wanted in that draft, and one pick before they were supposed to go, Ottawa takes the player that they want. But now, ultimately, Anaheim gets this kid, big, strong power forward, plays a very similar style to a guy like Rick Nash. Not as big as Rick Nash, and maybe not as skillful as Rick Nash, but definitely faster than Rick Nash. And a guy who definitely has NHL caliber talent. Um, Anaheim also gets themselves a first round pick. So for Stefan Nason, a guy who maybe he we see playing in about a year or so, former star for the Plymouth Whalers. For Jake Silverberg, and he'll enter his official sophomore year as a top six forward, and a guy who plays a pretty identical style to that of Corey Perry, but not as good as Corey Perry, more of like a 20, 25 goal scorer, but he is faster than Corey Perry. Um, but whenever you hear two Corey Perrys on the same team, that is a dream come true for sure. Um, but Bobby Ryan was really the only significant loss for the Anaheim Ducks this season. Um, they had a lot more gains than losses. That includes Silverberg and Nason. Of course, the first round pick. So you could bet your butt on it that Anaheim's going to be rooting for Ottawa to do poorly for the upcoming season. Um, but don't think that would be the only splash Anaheim would make this summer. They also would make a signing of a player who was formerly a member of their '07 Cup team and was also a member of the Los Angeles Kings Cup team in 2012. Dustin Penner returns to Anaheim, signing a one-year deal. Penner, unfortunately, has not been the same player over the past couple of seasons. His offense has just gone down ever since he arrived in Los Angeles. The only time he ever really played well in a Los Angeles Kings uniform was in the 2012 playoffs when he finished that postseason with 3 goals and 11 points. And he was a huge part of that team. He also scored one of those goals being the overtime winner in double OT in Game 5 against the Phoenix Coyotes. So, big moment for big Dustin Penner. But now for Dustin Penner, maybe his mindset was to get back to the way he was. Maybe he had to go back to his roots. And maybe guys like Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry could be big influences on Dustin Penner, which leads us to some of the big questions going into this season for the Anaheim Ducks. Who plays on the top line with Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry? Who's the second line center for the Anaheim Ducks? Who is the starting goaltender? And maybe most importantly, what becomes of Teemu Selanne? He just turned 43 years old this summer, and once again, it is time to consider the possibility of retirement. And considering this season, Teemu Selanne did show his age a little bit, not that much, but a little bit. The thoughts of retirement could come a little stronger this time around. However, at the same time, it would not surprise me if he came back to play for one more year. He was invited to the training camp for Team Finland to represent them in the 2014 Winter Olympics this year in Sochi, as well as Saku Koivu. But of course, whether that will happen or not will depend on Selanne's decision, which could take a little while longer for him to make a full decision. If Teemu Selanne does not come back, then someone will have to step up and take his spot on the second line right wing position. And assumingly, if Selanne doesn't come back, assumingly Jakob Silverberg would be the guy to take that spot. However, there's also big consideration of Jakob Silverberg playing on the top line at left wing with Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry. He adds a little bit of skill there. Emerson Edom has also been a guy who they've been thinking about putting on that line to add a little speed onto that line. Maybe they go gritty for that line. Put a guy like Matt Bolesky on that line. Or maybe even a guy like Kyle Palmieri, who the Ducks re-signed this offseason as a restricted free agent, along with Matt Bolesky and Ben Lovejoy. Um, a guy who saw quite a few games playing on that line and played really well. He definitely will be one of the top, if not the top candidate to play on that line. But in my personal opinion, in the end, I think Dustin Penner is going to be the guy playing on that line. He played on that line with them in the 06-07 campaign and formed the best kid line in the National Hockey League for sure in what they called the point per game line. It was Anaheim's second line back in the day before Getzlaf and Perry were fully developed players. And again, and they were also very fantastic in the playoffs as well, particularly Ryan Getzlaf. So a guy like Dustin Penner who can feed off Getzlaf and Perry could probably use those two as a scapegoat to maybe get his career back in shape. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if at some point in the season, if Penner is playing well, he gets a nice contract extension to stay in Anaheim, the place that realistically he never wanted to leave. Now let's talk about the goaltending. Jonas Hiller and Victor Foss, both undrafted goaltenders, both signed out of nowhere. And both finished with pretty much identical records this season. Foss going 15-6-2, Hiller going 15-6-4. So pretty identical records. Victor Foss, though, became a huge story when he broke out into the league, winning his first 8 games and was the starter for a while when Jonas Hiller wasn't exactly up to speed. And then when Jonas Hiller did finally get back into form, he played very, very well, going, I think, around 8-0-2. And he was just fantastic from there. He ended up being the guy they would go with in the playoffs. And he, despite the 7-game loss, he was remarkable. He really was. Jonas Hiller was absolutely remarkable in that series, and he gave the Red Wings a tough time. He really did. But Jonas Hiller only has a year remaining on his contract, and after this season, he becomes an unrestricted free agent. And now Anaheim will have to do some long-term thinking here. Whether Hiller plays well or not, do they keep him or do they let him go? Do they trade him midway through the season? And because it's becoming pretty obvious that a guy like John Gibson could soon step into that starting role, especially after what he did at 19 years of age for the World Junior Championships Under 20 tournament, MVP of that tournament, and the starting goaltender for Team USA, and basically was the biggest part on their quest to defeating Team Sweden to win the gold medal, followed by a successful run in the World's Tournament, defeating Team Finland in a shootout to help USA win the bronze medal in that tournament. So a guy who is quite arguably the top goaltending prospect in the NHL right now. Actually, no question, he is the top goaltending prospect in the NHL right now. And this is a guy who is going to be a superstar. And for Anaheim, they definitely will be praying to God when his time does come to play that he won't do what Justin Schultz did and leave and go off to a place like Edmonton or Calgary or the Islanders or any other team. This is a goaltender who they want to be their starter going forward. Speaking of John Gibson, let's talk about some of Anaheim's top prospects. They definitely have one of the best prospect pools in the National Hockey League for sure. And who could deny the talent of John Gibson? He is definitely the top prospect in Anaheim's system. You also got Hampus Lindholm, Peter Holland, and Rickard Rakell. Those two guys have a little NHL experience, specifically Peter Holland. But the one prospect that really stood out, in my personal opinion, was the number 10 prospect on their radar, Kevin Roy. I think this is a very good kid, very small kid, about 5'9", 160 pounds. Hence the reason why he was drafted maybe later than maybe he should have been. But he was a fourth round pick in 2012 by the Anaheim Ducks, picked 97th overall. And he became the first player in 10 years to score over 50 goals and over 100 points in the United States Hockey League in years. 54 goals, 109 points. He, as a member of the Lincoln Stars, and he also lit it up in college last year. And this kid, definitely a guy who reminds me of a guy like Ray Whitney. And this is going to be a good kid when he eventually breaks into the National Hockey League. A center and a guy who eventually will definitely be a top six forward, whether it's for the Anaheim Ducks or whether it comes to the point where they have too many prospects and they can't afford to keep a guy like Kevin Roy. Um, Last but not least, for every single team in the National Hockey League, they always have to rely on one player that has to play well in order to make the playoffs. And most of the time you do turn to your goaltending and maybe even your captain, a guy like Ryan Getzlaf, who after his worst NHL season with 11 goals and 57 points in 11-12, had a huge comeback year in 44 games last year, scoring 15 goals and 49 points. However, the player on the Anaheim Ducks that I personally think needs to play well in order for Anaheim to be a playoff team is Cam Fowler. Reason being, Cam Fowler, after a very successful rookie season, has had two really down years, specifically this year. He spent a lot of the year hurt, only played 37 games, and he only had, in those 37 games, only 1 goal and 10 assists for a combined 11 points and a -4 rating, which technically is actually his best plus rating because in every season he's played in the NHL, he's been a minus player. But this is a guy who's basically expected to be our generation's Scott Niedermayer. Now, will he be as good as Scott Niedermayer was? Absolutely not. However, this is the closest thing we are going to get for a long time to a guy like Scott Niedermayer. So, in order for the Ducks to be successful this season, Cam Fowler has to have a breakout season. He's had a couple of seasons to learn his form, his true form in the National Hockey League, and I think that this is the year he needs to break out if he hopes to have a future on this Anaheim blue line. Overall, though, do I think Anaheim is going to be a playoff team? Absolutely. I think Bruce Boudreau's system has sunk in to the point where they won't be missing the playoffs for a while. They have much better goaltending than the Washington Capitals ever had at his time in Washington, and they still have better goaltending than the Washington Capitals. So I think the Anaheim Ducks are a playoff team. And that's basically it. Thank you guys for joining me today. For tomorrow's episode of Hockey on the Spot, we will be covering the Calgary Flames. Looking forward to that, so be sure to join me. Until then, I'm Brandon Barenfeld, and this has been Hockey on the Spot, Episode 3. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.